All right, hi everyone. My name is Joe Monteleone. I'm a crazy modern mystic, and I'm going to say two quick things about me, and then I'm going to go right into the material because we have a lot to cover. So my name is Joe. My goal is enlightenment, and I think that that can sound really bold, but I honestly don't know what more practical goal there could possibly be. I mean, who doesn't want infinite bliss, complete ending of suffering? And we live in a time where all this information is sort of becoming more accessible and developing, and so that's kind of what I'm obsessed with. So I'm going to share with you various connections between tarot and various mystical traditions, and yeah, let's get into it. I'm going to share a slide. I'm going to share like 40 or 100 slides, and if you want, I uploaded this document to the website, but I'm going to share that slide and we're going to jump right in. So let's get into this gig. So a couple things before we begin, not to scare you, but my presentations have caused existential crises before. Now this can be a good thing. Remember that everything is just an interesting point of view. If I start scaring you, just remember they're all just ideas anyway. But I've had people that were like, oh my God, like what is real, and start to have experiences. But that's also kind of my goal. I love an existential crisis. Who doesn't? The ideas I will be presenting are just ideas. These ideas have helped me transform my life. That said, they are not right or wrong. They, like tarot, are just tools. The connections I draw between disciplines are not strict correspondences. I'm not the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, but they are loose resemblances that I find to be valuable and interesting. Number 5, things are going to get heretical. Deliciously heretical. If you have really strong views about certain things, that's cool, but I'm going to invite you to just open up your mind and play with this stuff. This is not classical music, it's jazz. So I really want to invite everyone to participate and just kind of like flirt with the ideas a bit. Get jiggy with it, okay? If I don't scare you away, I recommend rewatching the presentation because there are different layers and contexts to the material that I'll be presenting. So I might be going through something and you might think, oh, well, this is kind of like more that, and you're probably right, and there's another context, another dungeon doorway into another room of an esoteric wormhole that could exist there. You're probably right. So there's a lot of contexts and layers to all of this stuff. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about tarot mysticism. And tarot mysticism is a word I use to describe my efforts and curiosities around tarot to potentially illustrate some method of enlightenment or intense self-knowledge. I want to introduce to you two people you probably already know, Arthur Edward Waite and Aleister Crowley. Arthur Edward Waite, you pull open the pictorial key to the tarot and you read the Fool. What does he say about the Fool? He says the Fool is spirit in search of experience. He says of the Hanged Man that it expresses the relation in one of its aspects between the divine and the universe. He says of the Judgment card, it is the card which registers the accomplishment of the great work of transformation in answer to the summons of the supernal, which summons is heard and answered from within. Very cool stuff. But if I said any of those things to a client, I don't think I would see that client again, right? So my curiosity is, what are these guys talking about? Not necessarily from a magical ritualistic standpoint that they usually associate tarot with, but from a more mystical approach / some sort of self-development on mystical steroids. That's what we're looking at. So I'd like to kind of show you what we're going to be looking at and what we're not going to be looking at in this presentation. I'm definitely not going to be teaching you a spread, but I am going to be presenting knowledge that may do certain things. So I'd like to introduce you to someone named Maya. This is her right here. Can everyone see Maya? She's so cute. She is a tarot reader, and she's doing two things here. And this is how I define tarot divination, right? So in tarot divination, what Maya is doing is she is a subject, a reader, becoming aware of objects of divination through her symbolic medium of cards. That's her reading for herself. Just a general kind of way to define potential tarot reading. So questions like, how do I get paid? How do I get laid? How do I stay unafraid? How do I enjoy life's parade? And etc. Obviously, the questions can get much deeper and span whole realms of things. But then she reads for others, and she becomes the subject, and she's becoming aware of objects through divination within another subject, the querent, the questioner, the sitter, through her symbolic medium of cards. Questions like, how do they get paid? How do they get laid? How do they stay unafraid? How do they enjoy life's parade? And various other questions. The tarot mysticism process, in contrast to that, is a subject, Maya, becomes aware of herself, just herself, through the symbolic medium of cards. Notice the language here is very important. The subject becomes aware of the subject, not subject becomes aware of an object. So in tarot divination, whenever we divine, we're looking at an aspect of ourselves. We're looking at ourselves in the past, in the present, in the future, in relationship to this person, in this circumstance. It is always an idea of ourself that isn't quite our whole self. But in the tarot mysticism process, what we're looking at is the whole self, okay? So the big question is, how does a self know itself? So this gets into the realm of mysticism. So I want to do a quick exercise. I'm going to do a quick exercise with everyone before I continue. I would like everyone to take a moment to just close your eyes, notice your body, and I'd like you to find one distal extreme of your body, one part that's like the edge of your body, the very end of your body. So whether it's the top of your head, or maybe if you stretch out your arm, it's the end of your middle finger, or if it's the bottom of your feet, find the very edge of your body, at least one side, okay? And now I'd like you to find the opposite edge of that. So if I'm looking at like my middle finger of my right hand, I feel that as one edge. I feel the middle finger of my left hand, that is another edge. I feel the two edges of my body. Cool? So now what I'd like you to do is do another edge. Do like top of the head to the bottom of the feet. Feel the two edges. Feel the borders of the body. Okay? We're good? So now what I'd like you to do is find the edges of your mind. Did anyone find the edges of your mind? If you did, hit me up because I really want to talk to you. Most people don't, though. So what's happening here is we're having an experience physically of a finite experience. We have limitation. We start somewhere, we end somewhere. In space, but also in time. We're born and we die. Yet, there is this almost an intuition of an infinity. Because pure awareness, consciousness, our mind, doesn't really have these edges, right? Even when we fall asleep, we remember that we were sleeping. Even in deep sleep, we have an awareness that we were in deep sleep. It doesn't stop, okay? It's kind of boundless. This is super, super important. So I really want you to feel and just keep going back to that sense of, I experience a finite, yet I intuit an infinite. This is nothing new. But by the way, everything I teach it's nothing new. It's just I'm a master curator of really, really cool ideas. But anyway, so the mystics that's one of the big questions of the mystics. That's kind of the mystic's dilemma, is why is there an experience of a finite world, yet an intuition, or maybe a hope, Nietzsche might say that, of an infinite world. So the mystics ask things like, why was the universe created? How does something come out of nothing? Why do we experience the finite but have an intuition of the infinite? Why duality? And of course, how do we end suffering? Right? Just casual, whatever. Just, musings. The mystics' answer to these questions are often found in a sort of self-knowledge that leads to an experience of oneness. Testimonies of this experience exist in all forms of mysticism. Some call this a perennial philosophy. Now, I'm kind of a perennialist, and perennial philosophy is an approach to philosophy and spirituality that assumes a common core truth from which originates esoteric and exoteric knowledge. I'm not like a hardcore perennialist, but when you read enough of these testimonies of mystics and mystical philosophers and various devotees, it's like you know when you're reading the experience, right? It's just like it's the most beautiful thing ever to read. So not quite proof of the perennial philosophy, but still kind of funny. So I don't know when I found this meme, but there's this meme floating around where it's like this silly little like assault on interior design. This little like the sign that says, I am enough, I am enough, I am enough, I am enough. And then the meme goes, for only $10.99, you can let every visitor in your home know that you are struggling. I just love it. I would totally have this up in my, I love it. But what I found interesting was 2,000 years earlier, a very handsome man said a very similar thing. His name is Plotinus, and look at those cheekbones. Isn't he sexy? So Plotinus says almost the same thing in his Enneads. He says, ready? Consider I'm enough, right? He says, the holy simplex and veritable self-sufficing can be lacking at no point. Self-intellection begins in that principle which, secondarily self-sufficing, yet needs itself and therefore needs to know itself. That principle by its self-presence achieves its sufficiency in virtue of its entire content. It is the all. It becomes thus competent from the total of its being in the act of living towards itself and looking upon itself. Hashtag I am enough, 270 CE, sexy Plotinus. By the way, Plotinus was he was a follower of Plato, but he kind of started the Neoplatonic tradition, which is extremely influential on tarot and various disciplines associated with tarot, Hermeticism, Kabbalah, all different really cool stuff that we're going to look into a little bit. He's also just so hot, right? So I'm going to review a lot. I'm going to take, because every step, the way that this presentation is structured is the entire presentation kind of exists in every step of the way. So in every step, I'm going to review what we're looking at, what we're asking, and kind of, yeah, so just stick with me. So review of what we're looking at and what we're asking. We're asking why universe, we're asking why duality, we're asking why suffering. The answer of many mystics would be that it exists, that those answers can only exist in some sort of self-knowledge or experience of oneness. So let's look at mysticism. Let's define what that's about. Mysticism is, and this is a very loose definition, but any method or discipline that facilitates the experience of oneness, the absolute reality. Mysticism is the highest meta, okay? What is meta? Meta is anything referring to itself. It's not quite the movie Inception, but it's anything that's self-referential. So mysticism is a meta discipline. The goal of the mystic is to know themselves, right? Remember Maya being the subject and knowing her, the subject, instead of divination, which is knowing an object of her, subject, right? So self-awareness is the goal. But Plotinus comes back in with another quote because he's just so damn handsome. He says, how can the knowing phase know itself in the known when it has chosen to be the knower and put itself apart from the known? In such self-knowledge, by sundering, it can be aware only of the object, not of the agent. It will not know its entire content or itself as an integral whole. It shows the phase seen, but not the seeing phase, and thus has knowledge of something else. So he's pointing out the paradox. Okay, Plotinus is mystical, by the way. He kind of took Platonism and made it, he remixed it in a mystical way. He started Neoplatonism, as I said. So this is the paradise of paradox. And it's a really fun place to be. So now we have two selves. So which self are we knowing if there's a knower and a known? We want to know the knower, but being the knower creates the known and two selves. So this is one of those slides where there's various contexts to the words I'm using. And I do recommend coming back and playing with them and seeing what comes up for you. But I'm going to propose it this way, and you can remix it, change it, explore it later. But generally, in a lot of mysticism and spiritual work, we look at this sort of division between this capital S self and this lowercase s self. And for the context of this presentation, I'm going to connect the capital S self with the knower and the lowercase s self with the known. And we can debate that later if you want. The macrocosm is the knower and the microcosm is the known. We know as above, so below, right? The catchphrase of Hermes Trismegistus. He had a whole brand in antiquity. It was such a moment. You had to be there. I'm just kidding, I wasn't there. But I wish I was. That would be so cool, right? Like being a mystic, channeling Hermes Trismegistus, writing down all this stuff, the Corpus Hermeticum. Corpus Hermeticum was a mystical channeled writings from this awesome dude named Hermes Trismegistus, who, Hermeticism was this kind of mystical philosophy, Greek and Egyptian, and it influenced tarot a lot. So the big self, consciousness. The truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God. The one, as Plotinus talks about. The ground of being of Meister Eckhart. The Atman of the Upanishads. The absolute, the concealed of the Kabbalists. And most importantly, that from which all language flees. That cannot be, this is huge. That from which all language flees, okay? When we really understand this, it refutes all of materialism and reductionism, and it just throws science on its head. I'm sorry, it just does, and I can't get into why right now, but it will. It's so cool. But there's no language that can access this, right? So what are we even doing here, right? So this is our intuition of the infinite that we can't put into words, right? Where are the edges of your mind, your awareness? Where does that part of you begin and end? That's the paradox. This is the self that we're looking to explore. The divine self that is in all of us, whether you see it as a non-dualist way, where it is all of us, or it's an aspect of us, or it's our higher self, or whatever connection we have to this source that is so beyond language, that's this big self. Now there's the known, which is the smaller self, which is the regular colloquial self that wants to get paid, get laid, stay unafraid. This is the self we usually look at with divination. I'm not saying we can't look at the bigger self of divination, but usually when we're working with clients, this is what they're asking about, yeah? So, how do we know the knower? How do we know this big self? How do we know that intuition of infinity that is experiencing this experience of finitude, limitation? The mystic might answer that the self-knower is known by reconciling it with the self, the known. So the knower reconciles itself with the known. This is what is often symbolized by the Philosopher's Stone, the Father and the Son. This is the great work, and there are many maps and symbols and disciplines and so many books that express this connection. They express this bridge. So what we're doing is we're building a bridge from the experience of the finite to the intuition of the infinite, and hopefully realizing that infinitude, realizing that pure consciousness, mystery, absolute. And many of these maps, maybe even all of them, in some way show oftentimes a process of creation. Okay, let's go to Plotinus again because he's just so handsome and I cannot even. If the soul is questioned as to the nature of that intellectual principle, the perfect and all-embracing, the primal self-knower, because we're looking for self-knowledge, it has but to enter into that principle or to sink all its activity into that, and at once shows itself to be the effective possession of blah, blah, blah. He essentially says it can make itself the medium by which to attain some vision of it. So we're making the small self, or an aspect of our soul, of our whatever normal self that we can kind of experience a little bit, we're making that a medium through which we can experience the big daddy self, the big consciousness, the absolute, that from which cannot be described, okay? As above, so below, right? The magician card. So let's just review a little bit. Why we're asking why suffering, why universe, why duality? The mystics say the answer can only exist in some sort of deep self-knowledge, some sense of oneness, experience of the absolute. But then there are two selves. Which self? The knower or the known? We reconcile the two selves with symbolic maps, mystical disciplines, meditation, Raja, all the yogas, everything, all these spiritual technologies, we reconcile the two selves, and what that does is it allows them to merge, the knower and the known merge together, subject and object are destroyed, and there is complete oneness, okay? Again, this is not me talking, this is like so many different traditions. Read the Yoga Sutras, they're awesome. Now there are so many maps to this, and I'm so excited to show you the next slide because it's been my hyperfixation for the past couple months. I'm gonna give you a peek before we actually go full into it, right? Look at that, isn't it beautiful? Ah, so good. Just turns me on. Look at all this stuff. I love it. Okay. Before I go into that, which is has a lot of more of the mystical disciplines, I want to share with you something more contemporary that I love when science and mysticism kind of coincide. So there's this dude named David Hawkins, and he was one of the most successful psychiatrists ever. And he is a psychiatrist that became a mystic, which happens sometimes because that's just, I guess, the path. And what he did was he used a very unique research method that used kinesiology and the body and muscle testing to discover a lot of really cool things and to discover what's good for the body, what's good for the mind. And he put together this beautiful template of consciousness and the path, and whether that's personal development or mysticism, it's all the same thing, right? Our spiritual growth. And this is it. And I gotta say, when I first saw this, I thought it was way too simple. I was like, oh, shame at the bottom, enlightenment on top. Okay, that's kind of simple. But when you read his book is Letting Go, and there's also Power versus Force, and he wrote several books. It's literally what I'm going to show you is the great chain of being. It's enlightenment. It's the mystical process. It's so beautiful, and it's very contemporary, and it's very easy to understand. And I also, if anyone here is a professional tarot reader, actually everyone should just get his book, Letting Go. But especially if you're a professional tarot reader, you read Letting Go, it will maximize your readings to such a degree because you'll know more thoroughly how to handle some of life's biggest challenges. How do we get paid, laid, stay unafraid? And all of these yummy things that show up. Desire, fear, grief, apathy, guilt, shame. Anyway, that's kind of a contemporary ladder from the experience of the finite to what we intuit as infinite above, right? So, the self, us, comes from the big self, the true us. In various forms of mysticism and philosophy, a map is drawn between the two. This is the ladder to the divine, our ultimate source. It has also been called the great chain of being. I'll be comparing 3 different maps on the following page. Please keep in mind that these systems are incredibly complex, and I'm not even scratching the surface to any of them. This is comparison, not specific direct correlation. Remember, I'm not the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. I'm just a weirdo that likes to curate ideas. Okay, so look at this beautiful thing. Okay, the 3 things I'm comparing here are tarot and the Kabbalistic tree of life, Plotinus' system, and the Mandukya Upanishad. Now, please keep in mind, these are like, Mandukya is thousands of years old, Kabbalah is like 1,000 years old. These are like rich traditions that will literally blow your mind. They're so freaking cool. But I couldn't help, my inner perennialist couldn't help but notice the similarities between the two. And essentially what's happening here, and remember, this is just a general kind of pattern that does not do the different traditions justice, but it's something I have noticed. There's this absolute no-thingness. This is the realm of negative theology, this red area. And that red area is essentially the place where we can't even talk about the absolute, the truth, consciousness, whatever it is. It transcends language. So there's really nothing we can do about that. And that will become, or emanate, or appear as, depending on the tradition, that will become this physical experience that we're having literally right now in this present moment. Like not millions of years ago in the Big Bang and becoming this, but kind of like almost literally this moment, which is the physical world down here, the finite. And the way it does it is through that paradox, that paradise. Remember the paradise of paradox up here? It does it through this paradise of paradox, which is this blue area. In this blue area, something crazy happens. The universe, cosmos, this divine somehow, and this is what all the mystics are looking for. When you read, this is what they're all trying, like the specific moment, the turning point. Somehow, this infinitude, this nothingness or everythingness becomes some sort of self-aware. And by virtue of becoming self-aware, there is a birth of duality. Now, of course, the Advaita Vedantins would say there's no birth of duality. What are you talking about? And Plotinus would say it might be an emanation. Kabbalists would probably say it's an emanation or something else. But just they're all slightly different. But this is kind of the key place where the seeds of duality, the birth of creation and causation, possibility of things, God the Creator, that moment of I am. Oh my God, I exist, right? And I exist is kind of similar to I am enough, I am enough, I am enough. Not really similar, but kind of. That moment of realizing fullness, okay? We're down here realizing fullness going up, but yeah. So there's a couple paradigms we can use to look at these maps. One is the creator paradigm, where God is the creator above in red, and that creates our experience below in green. That's a cool paradigm, Abrahamic religions and stuff. Then there's another paradigm when we make it even more like extreme, where it's God above dreaming or experiencing this physical moment below in green, okay? That's maybe Tantra and other Indian philosophies and systems. And then there's the most radical, which you would have to talk to an Advaita Vedantin about, where they say, what universe? And they say God alone, Brahman alone exists. And Gaudapada, who's an amazing commenter, he's brilliant. He comments on the Mandukya Upanishad. He says that that this world is not a creation of God, it's not a dream of God, it's not an experience of God, it is the pure nature of God. He like cuts it all down. He's like very extreme non-dualist, very cool. So these are just various relationships that we can have with the divine and explore philosophically, mystically, theologically. And if you guys want, we can go back to the slide and geek out. There's a lot here. Oh, tarot, that's what we're here for. Let's talk about that. So, tarot and Kabbalah have married probably, I don't know, maybe 1700s, 1800s, I don't know when they started doing it. But tarot and Kabbalah have a lot of really cool correlations. So this is the Kabbalistic tree of life. The tree of life is a system, remember, that kind of tries to make a bridge, or beautifully does, it makes a bridge between the divine source and our experience right now, above and below. And the tarot correlates with that tree of life in various ways. And there's all these attributions, astrological attributions, Kabbalistic attributions, symbols, deities, all this really cool stuff. And so in this sense, the tarot and the major arcana show a path between, build a bridge between the beginning, the source, the absolute, and this experience that we're having right now. So review. I'm going to speed up a little bit because I know we're already like a half hour in, and I want time for questions. So review. Why suffering? Why universe? Why duality? The answer exists in self-knowledge and oneness. But there are two selves. Which self? Because there's a self and a knower and a known. We reconcile the two selves with a symbolic map of creation that merge the knower and the known. Now, if you've studied some of this stuff, you might contest that there's a knower and a known that split out from an above, and you're correct. So there's a knower and a known here, and a knower and a known here, but we're going to put a pin in that maybe for later. We reconcile the two selves with symbolic maps of creation that merge the knower and the known. So non-duality up here, pure being, pure consciousness, no words to describe it, duality down here. Tarot divination exists in these two planes. Because in divination, there has to be duality. Has to be. Because you're asking a question, right? You are consulting the cards about yourself, which is your experience of yourself, or you're consulting the cards or another divination system about somebody else. Cool? The tarot mysticism process is inching towards the blue area, where it's like we are asking about ourself, but attempting to do it without splitting ourselves. The paradox, oh my God, something exists. Okay, so that's Maya, right? Becoming aware of herself. So, so this is why it's a lot of stuff. So over here in this column, we have a bunch of quotes from Plotinus in the middle column, and to the left column we have texts from the Mandukya Upanishad, and there's some connections. And if you want to geek out about this, you can come back and read it. Maybe if we have time towards the end, I'll come back and we can look at it. But what I find really cool is when we compare these two to the tarot and the tree of life. The tarot expressing this path, this means of the infinite becoming the finite. Now, a couple things. The Mandukya Upanishad is not an emanation system. So emanation is when like something becomes itself and kind of sheds itself or overflows or creates an image of itself, and then that image creates an image of itself, and that's really Plotinus and a little bit of Kabbalah. But the Mandukya Upanishad is not quite like that. It's a little different. It's more that these three layers, these three parts of the bridge, are experienced within this ultimate whole, and its approach is different. But just a little caveat thing to notice. But we can get into those differences in a bit if you want. So review. Why suffering? Why universe? Why duality? The answer exists in self-knowledge and oneness. But there are two selves if there is self-knowledge. So which self? We reconcile the two selves with the symbolic maps of creation that merge the knower and the known. Tarot is another map of the relationship between self and self, knower and known, subject and object, above and below. It expresses the map in several ways. The court card system is one way. The major arcana card system is another. But also, each card individually represents this relationship as well. As a tool influenced by Hermetic philosophy, as above, so below, the catchphrase of Hermes Trismegistus, right? As a tool influenced by Hermetic philosophy, the tarot is holographic. Hermetic philosophy is kind of holographic. It's like the whole nature of the universe of truth can be experienced at every scale, in every moment. That's what holographic means, right? Each card suggests the whole deck, okay? Really, and not there's because of the Hermetic philosophy that you may choose to apply to it and explore with tarot, but also by the nature of you looking at the card that happens as well. Okay, we'll put a pin in that for later. So we have the court card system here. I use a Thoth deck, but you can kind of, the way that the Thoth deck explains it better than the Rider-Waite-Smith for this purpose, but you can interchange them. And I use both decks for this presentation later on, but don't let the Thoth scare you. That's a whole other class. But I'm using the Thoth deck, just interchange them. But yeah, so the Thoth, like for example, the court card system represents the sacred name, the tetragrammaton, the name of God, which in itself shows a creative process. And the court cards personify each letter of that name of God, of that tetragrammaton, and also the four elements and how the universe came to be. So that in a creative way, we're seeing that creation, that bridge from source to our experience here. Okay. In the same way that the Tree of Life does, in the same way that the major arcana do, in the same way that even the minors do. So, why suffering, why universe, why duality? The answer exists in self-knowledge and oneness. But there are two selves. Which self? We reconcile the two selves with symbolic maps of creation that merge the knower and the known like tarot. So one might ask, well, why was it all created in the first place? Why do we even have these maps like tarot, Kabbalah, and poor attempts at comic book writing? Why two selves? It doesn't answer the question, you know? And the mystic might answer, because somebody asked. Asked what? Asked something along the lines of, why was the universe created? How does something come out of nothing? Why do we experience the finite but have an intuition of the infinite? Why duality? And of course, how do we end suffering? Right? Just casual, whatever, just, musings. The mystics' answer to these questions are often found in a sort of self-knowledge that leads to an experience of oneness. Testimonies of this experience exist in all forms of mysticism. Some call this a perennial philosophy. Now, I'm kind of a perennialist, and perennial philosophy is an approach to philosophy. Because somebody asked. Asked what? Asked something along the lines of, pause! Self-knowledge creates these questions to begin with. This creates infinite self-reflection like a laser between two mirrors. This idea is encapsulated by the Vedantic Mahavakyas, which are the great sayings, and other great mystical sayings. And these are essentially mystical mic drops, the big mystical mic drops. Some of them include, thou art that, the most famous one of the Chandogya Upanishad, or in the Old Testament, I am that I am. Or at the Temple of Apollo, know thyself. Or let's get freaky. But notice how each of these great sayings are meta. It's a self-referential thing going on. It's a self-reflection. Not in the sense that I reflect, who am I? I'm Joe, I'm giving a presentation. Is it going good? I don't know. Hopefully they enjoy it. But not that kind of self-reflection, like existential self-reflection. And that existential self-reflection is the Ouroboros and is the magician. And that entire presentation can be encrypted into just the magician. And then that whole relationship is the fool going into the magician. And that loop becomes elaborated upon in the high priestess and the empress and so on. Enough of the loop. Teach me something practical, Joe. Okay, let's get into something semi-practical. Contemplation. The tarot deck as a whole can be used to express and contemplate these mystical mic drops, knower knowing the known, above beholding the below, subject experiencing object, the infinite appearing as a, etc. Each card, like I said before, because remember the tarot is holographic, each card individually can do the same. If you go far enough into the paradoxical meta, well, you'll just have to see for yourself. Each card then becomes an expression of these mystical mic drops, of these Mahavakyas, of these radical existential self-references, okay, of as above, so below. So before I get into the practical, any questions? I can feel the edges of my mind, but this...
Look here, see if there are any questions, and also we'll look at the chat, see if there's anything as well. Anybody in the room, question? Nothing from the room, they're shy. We'll see if anything pops up in the chat. And I'm still here, not sure when my camera dropped.
Samantha, I can feel the edges of my mind, but the swirl inside seems black hole-ish. Okay, I'm gonna ask you, Samantha, where, locate those edges, tell me where they are. And the black hole-ish, where is that? And then I'm gonna ask you another question potentially after that. Like tell me when you find it, see if you can describe it. Okay, so can everyone still see the presentation? Okay, yes. Okay, cool. So, so each card is becoming a sort of mystical mic drop, and we're going to get into this now. So what I'm going to share with you is a heretical but holographic tree of life on non-dualist steroids. So this is not traditional Kabbalah, this is not Jewish Kabbalah, this is not Christian Kabbalah, this isn't really even Hermetic Kabbalah. This is a Kabbalistic crazy remix of a tree of life where I am kind of exploring that direct approach of whether it's the Advaita Vedanta, the Mandukya Upanishad, or Zen. Like Zen is like, it short circuits the mind so that you like go directly towards that experience of, existence. This is it. You know, it's full. This is it. Boom. There's even no words to it. It's just Zen, right? So, so the idea here is that, and again, we have our three paradigms. We have God creates the world that we're experiencing, right? Would be number one, Keter, the crown, pure consciousness, creates our embodiment down below this moment. Or we have the source, God, Brahman, whatever, dreams and experiences all of this universe, right? It's all a dream within Brahman, within God, within source. Or we have that third radical paradigm, which is what universe, it only is this absolute consciousness. That goes into the non-dualists and the Advaita Vedantins. So, so however, whatever I feel like a lot of things can fit into one of those paradigms, but you know, I'm sure there's others. But the tree of life is a tool to track that creative process, or that emanating process, or that bridge. And the tarot cards show bridges within this bridge, all these links between different things. And so one of the most powerful things I've learned is being the observer. Maybe you've heard of that. When you're the observer, when you connect to that observer, that silent witness that experiences everything, you don't identify with anything. You don't identify with your problems, your pains, your pleasures. You just witness it, right? You're the observer. It's one of the most powerful things you can do. That observer here is connected to here, Hokmah, number 2. And the Fool expresses pure consciousness becoming that observer, okay? So the Fool becomes an axiom or an aphorism of that pure consciousness becoming the observer that you are right now. And you can see the Fool right here. And the Magician, on the other hand, expresses the bridge between pure consciousness and the observed. So all that is observed, the experience that you're having of yourself is being observed by pure consciousness, right? And I systemize all of this stuff. So using this, each major arcana card with their many associations becomes its own mystical mic drop, its own modern Mahavakya for contemplation, used to point to your true nature as consciousness. This is not personal affirmation. This is existential affirmation of your full being, like your ultimate spiritual self. It's existential. Each card points to the same truth. All of the majors together create a bridge from the absolute to your current experience as you, okay? Then I kind of listed all of these various examples of ways in which, so all of these are like aphorisms, but they're not like, remember, it's not divination, okay? It's contemplation. I also made a RWS version of this too, because RWS is cool. I love RWS, it's great. My kind of main thing that I want to get across to you all is that there is like, I love divination. I do it for it's my whole living. Like I do divination for a living and I teach divination for a living. I love it. I don't want to diss it. I absolutely love it. I love helping people. I love healing, helping them heal. I love like divining for myself. It's amazing. But what I want to explore more with the tarot community is what can tarot show us beyond divination, beyond the concerns of our personal selves and more into our kind of existential self and what that means, kind of from a more mystical and even potentially a non-dualist approach to tarot. And I think it's really cool because I'll share something personal because we can get personal, right? So I used to have, when I was younger, I used to have a lot of really bad depression, really bad anxiety, all this stuff. And working with this material, I have essentially cured all of my depression and stuff. Like I've never been more happy and I feel really good. And I want to share these ideas because literally just being, like I said today, being the observer, being the silent witness, being that consciousness which observes objects, that in itself has helped me so much. So I hope these things can help you. If you have any questions, you could find me at tarotmysticismacademy.com. You have my YouTube, and hit me up throughout the rest of the event. So I'm going to do a shameless plug, and then maybe if we have time, I'll get into some examples of this stuff. So if you want more information on this, probably my YouTube channel is the best, Joe Monteleone on YouTube. I run a school called Tarot Mysticism Academy, where I go into a lot of this material, the esoteric side of tarot, the mystical side of tarot. And that's kind of my favorite thing to do. But I also teach people how to run a spiritual business, get clients, do all that. So I have my Capricorn Sun, which helps people with their spiritual business. And then I have my Pisces Moon and my Neptune conjuncting my Sun, which is all the mystical material. But yeah, so that's tarotmysticismacademy.com. But I have a lot of stuff on this on YouTube, and if you want to learn any of these things, if you want to learn tarot and Kabbalah and all those connections, you'll definitely want to go to my YouTube channel. I have a lot of videos on that. If you want to learn more about Mandukya Upanishad, you have to go to Swami Sarva Priyananda's YouTube channel. It's amazing. That's like the whole next level, though. I'll be probably making more content about Plotinus and some like earlier mysticism. But yeah, y'all are amazing. So much love.